Hello everyone, George Lecakes here, and we are on the verge of a new project. So I'm still working on everything else that I'm working on and everything, but every now and then I need to kind of diverge and do something a little bit different just because, you know, when hobbies become work, you become less likely to want to work on them. So a new version of a classic game that I absolutely loved and grew up with as a child came out on Steam, the Switch, and probably several other platforms. And that is a new version of the game Toejam and Earl. Now, I absolutely loved this game as a child. I played it on the Sega with my sister all the time, and it was an amazing game. And then, quite a few years later, a sequel came out, which was just absolute crap. And now, the original game has been remixed, or remastered, I should say. And this has really made me to want to create, much as I'm doing with FNAF in some ways, but an ode to this game. But unlike FNAF, which was originally only supposed to be like maybe 6 or 7 videos, and I was just going to condense everything down to, you know, okay, here's a camera system, here's this, here's that. You know, it spiraled into this giant project where we're up to 180 episodes at this point. And it's kind of, it's taken on a mind of its own going into VR, and now I'm doing all these realistic texture work and whatnot. And you know, that's fun, that's fine and all, but I also want to have a small project that I'm going to put together, and I wanted to brainstorm that out in this first episode. So I'm using a program called NovaMind. I actually found out about this program a long time ago from a website called 3D Buzz. It's kind of in recession at this point. Unfortunately, the founder of the website passed away just a few years back. But, you know, his knowledge lives on in all of us. And I like this program a lot because it allows me to brainstorm and come up with different things. So I do use it from time to time to figure stuff out. So I wanted to, in this first episode, to brainstorm what are all the features that I want to create in my own ode to Toejam and Earl game inside of the Unity engine. I do plan on creating the functionality for all this. Whether or not we get to an end game that's 100% functional, I'm not exactly sure. But I'm kind of interested in just sitting down and trying to implement all the different pieces that are necessary to make something like this work. So what are those pieces? Well, if you're not familiar with the game Toejam and Earl, I recommend you go watch a couple videos. I'll put some links in the description. But it's a really interesting game where it's kind of open world. I mean, an open world back in Sega Genesis was not really heard of that much. But the idea is you have a series of different levels and you move between them through an elevator. And in each level, things get progressively harder with more enemies and things, but you're trying to find ultimately the pieces of your ship that have been lost due to different incidents and so forth. And with each piece you get closer. Now, I will completely admit, I never beat the original game as a child. You getting up to like level 12 and whatnot, things just kind of get hard really fast and difficult. It also has a unique system where it's 2-player co-op, which is something I've never tried to do in Unity, so that might be interesting in and of itself. In addition to it being co-op, it also has a present system, which means that there are random presents all throughout the level that you pick up. And if you haven't seen a present before, you don't know what's inside. And it could be a random item, it could be a good item, it could be a bad item, it could kill you, it could shoot you off in a random direction with rocket skates. It just depends. So these are the kind of functional elements that I want to create in a game, an ode to Toejam and Earl. It won't be Toejam and Earl. I'm not going to recreate it because a new game just came out, and the last thing I want to do is get a copyright strike against anything. But it's going to be in the same vein as that game. I'm going to make it wacky. I'm going to make it crazy. I'm going to make it cartoony. I'm going to try to let my creative juices come out with this because for a very long time, things that I've been doing have been very code-based, very realistic, very to the point. So I think this is going to be a great excuse for me to kind of go back to my high school years where anything under the sun would work and I can make stuff as crazy as I want to. It doesn't matter. Let's start breaking this game down a little bit in this episode and get a sense of all the different pieces of functionality I need. And we're going to continually come back to this mind document, this brainstorming session, and probably add elements, remove elements, and see how things go. But this is the beginning of everything. So that being said, what do we have in this game? Well, we have co-op play. I don't know if we want to do multiplayer at this time, so let's do multiplayer or split screen. Split screen is what the original game has, but there are issues that I think about as soon as I hear that inside of Unity, because Unity has an audio engine that uses one audio listener. So how do I make that audio listener work across two different states? Do I have it move back and forth? Do I try to average things? Do I try to? I have no idea how to do this. So that's something, you know, to think about. But then there's also other stuff. There are levels, individual stages, and each one of those are built one on top of the other. Now, I don't remember if they're random or not. I doubt they are, but you know, are they random? I don't know. They also have missing segments that appear when near. So parts of the level are going to be invisible until you walk close to them, and then they grow outwards from that location, which is kind of interesting as well. I don't think the levels are random, because I always remember level 1 being the same thing, which is you on an island with a little tiny smaller island off to the right, and then water everywhere. And then if you happen to get the right items, you can travel to a couple other distant islands in there. Okay, so levels, we're going to get rid of random. They're not going to be random at all, but I don't know, making them procedural might be kind of interesting and fun. This is a big, I'm not sure. That might be a lot to bite off for this particular project. So we have co-op, we have levels, we have the present system. And the other system we have is also the complete your spaceship, which is the total objective of the game, is to acquire pieces on random levels. Find, I don't remember how many it is, probably like 10 pieces to complete game. This is the only way to win. That's the main objective of the game. So then we've also got our present system now. And our present system is going to be probably a set number of presents. Each augment gameplay in some way. And that's vague, but we'll get to it with time. Once again, I don't want to replicate Toejam and Earl. I want to create my own experience. But we'll talk about some of the different things that are in that game and how they make the game fun by sometimes helping you, and at the same time, the same present that just saved your butt could completely destroy you. Like there's a present called the rose bush, and if you're not constantly walking while you use the rose bush, which spawns a rose bush behind you, it will prick you in the butt and cause you to lose health. But if you walk and use it, you can use it to stop other enemies from coming at you and even damage them. So once again, there's some interesting stuff that we'll have to think about. We want to think about these elements functionally, not copying them exactly. You know, what is fun about each element and trying to come up with something different that can also fill that vein. Okay, so we got co-op, we got levels, we got a present system, we've got completing your spaceship as the major objective. We have NPCs, and NPCs are actually broken into two separate veins. Those are player friendly, and then those are, of course, enemies. And they're both in the other game, and the player-friendly ones provide opportunities for buffs. And how do you use them? Well, for the most part in the game, you have a couple things. There's an inventory system. So let's inventory system. And the inventory system contains your presents. It also contains money, as they would say. And then, of course, there's also other things like just, I have co-op here, but there's also just the player itself. And let's throw that down here. And then let's just talk about the player. And the player has health, has experience points. And then because of that, they have things like, well, with experience points, they gain more health. But I believe they also gain other benefits as well. And there are multiple types of players. There's Toejam and there's Earl. Toejam is faster, Earl is slower, but I believe Earl has more health. So those are all things that we're also going to need to think about in our game, because we're going to want multiple players as well that are moving around. So this is looking at a kind of a high level functional element of all the different pieces that we need. Oh, and there's also other things. There's traveling between levels, which is the elevator. And you have to get to the elevator. Both characters on same level, the lowest character has to get to the highest level in order for both characters to progress further on. But if you fall off ledges, and that's another thing too, is falling off ledges. Let's put that on your left. Falling off to lower world. That's another thing. So you could go to the edge of a world. And what you have to understand is that each world past the first one has basically a blank starscape void that you're dealing with. And when you walk to the edge, if you fall off, you will fall down to the previous level. Now, typically I believe you always fall onto some kind of land, regardless of where you fell above, because otherwise it'd be bad. You'd fall through multiple levels. So we would have to come up with a system where it would identify where you're going to fall in the prior level and fit you there. Now, another thing too is with levels, missing segments that appear when near, we need to come up with a system by which we have 3D models that are going to combine together with each of these, and we can place them as necessary in that level, but they won't seem like separate segments. So there's actually a lot to think about with something like this. And we're not even talking about sound, music, narration. I mean, the game itself has a very early 90s, maybe even late 80s vibe to it with how the music works. It's very funk-esque. Now, I don't want to replicate that. I'm not a funk master, so I'm probably going to go with something else for that matter. But I would like to keep the silliness of it. So let's create another tab here and just say mood or style. Let's call it mood. And in that, and with mood, we just want to say simple things like funny, not serious, wacky, crazy at times, parodies of the real world, but not dated. What do I mean by that? Well, in the game, there's things like a crazy dentist, and a crazy dentist isn't really a dated element. Regardless of the last couple generations in our life, everyone can look at a dentist as being a crazy person. There are ducks with tomato launchers. There's a guy with a carrot suit, all kinds of crazy stuff like that. There's a wizard. All these different elements are things that we're going to want to think about and use to make our world even more interesting. And I want to keep it lighthearted as well. I don't want to make this dark. So let's do that too. Lighthearted. I'm not looking for anything morbid or dark. I'd rather have this game accessible. With that, I think we've done a good job at just beginning to flesh out each element. Now, most likely, before we dive into coding each one of these, we're probably going to rip one of these elements off right here and then create an entire list of how I'm going to implement each of those and see how it actually works. Now, obviously, I haven't talked at all about the models that are necessary, the animations, the rigging, and all that stuff. And all that's going to come. I'm really trying to focus right now on just what are the features that I need, and we can always insert the art assets and everything else later on as necessary. All right. So you know what? I hope you enjoy this new series. I know I'm going to. This is something that I think I'm going to get a lot of fun out of. And I hope you get a lot of fun at watching how I'm going to implement this and make it actually happen. So I will see you in the next several videos, because I know it's going to be at least a couple videos long. And yeah, let's see what we can do together. So long and goodbye.